I'm
Yeah.
with Jacob Vince, the Chief Executive of Christian Friends of Israel UK. Now, Jacob, what do you do in the UK for Christian Friends of Israel?
Right. Well, the ministry began just over 40 years ago now, and the purpose was to bless Israel and also to serve the church. So there was those two aspects. But today we do that under three strands: encouraging understanding, which is a focus towards the UK church. Understanding of Israel in context. So often it's taken out of context, but in context of the Bible, history, and today. So I can explore that a little bit further later. And then we also, our second strand is challenging prejudice. That's prejudice against Israel and also anti-Semitism. And we tend to do that alongside the Jewish community or Jewish community organizations. And then thirdly, challenging prejudice, which is sorry, not challenging prejudice, that was the second. Thirdly, assisting community, which or cross culturally within Israel itself. So we do that through CFI Jerusalem and other projects that we support direct.
Is there a lot of ignorance in the church when it comes to Israel?
Sadly, Israel doesn't isn't well understood within the church. It tends to get airbrushed out of sermons. For example, they might use the term of the Bible or they call it the people of God in the Old Testament rather than Israel.
Mm.
Well, it's called Israel many times. So that's certainly that's one aspect. I think there are three sort of areas where the church has become rather dominant, and Israel is sort of left out of the story, or the church adopts or appropriates aspects of Israel to itself, which you can understand. But first of all, you need to understand Israel in its context, certainly biblically and actually historically. When the Apostle Paul was writing to the Gentilized church of in Rome, he saw what was happening and spoke very clearly as the apostle to the Gentiles. He re-emphasized that and said, "Don't be ignorant and don't be arrogant." Unfortunately, through history, let alone today, the church has largely suffered from a degree of ignorance and a degree of arrogance, and they both feed off one another. So if you're arrogant, you can become ignorant, and if you're ignorant, then you likely become arrogant. And so the antidote to that really is to understand with humility.
What are some of the misunderstandings when it comes to Israel?
Well, I think obviously currently today they would think of Israel in terms of the nation state. They may have been on a tour of Israel. Generally, and there's different types of tours you can go on. There are some would be going on a just purely sort of biblical sites, wouldn't meet anyone. There are others that, and it depends who your guide is and how it could be slanted one way or the other in support. So that's one of the things. You're talking about different other ways of ignorance. I think really understanding Israel in the Bible. When you, I mean, it's said that that there's a veil sometimes referred to over Jewish people's eyes. It's only in part, not in whole. But sometimes we sort of read the scriptures and look at it through a kind of trellis of what we've already predetermined. So we're reading from what I call season 5 back into the Bible. We don't read it forward, and also we don't read the whole Bible. We tend to pick out the bits that relate to Jesus, so we read it backwards. But you need to read it forwards as well as backwards. So, and then it's too easy to appropriate or read ourselves into the story, even the story of Israel, which is okay to a part, but not before you understand Israel's story to begin with. So it's written for us, but not about us. We need to get that balance correct.
Is the Israel in the Bible the Israel of today?
I don't believe there's a straight line from the Israel in the Bible to the Israel today. However, and people do ask me this, but I do think there are significant strong chords that run through to today. Certainly, as far as the Jewish people are concerned, they know their history, they know their family, they know their heritage. So yes, the land is still the land. Obviously, it's gone through lots of different leaps and bounds, but the concept of exile and return is set into the Bible. I think people do struggle with how it works with the land, but actually, so that needs a bit more good teaching, not ignoring. If you ignore something, you become ignorant. I think there must be a link between the two words.
Do the promises that God made in the book of Genesis still stand today for the Jewish people?
Well, I think they do, because God is a God who is a covenant making and a covenant keeping God. And he makes covenant with individuals for everybody.
Mm.
So we might say, well, I don't like the fact that you blessed Abraham, but actually, if we think about it twice, he's going to have to, he wants to do it relationally with individuals. So he does it initially through Abraham and through his family line. He does give certain promises to him, but we get the benefit of that blessing. So, the fact that someone has to go first and someone can come second, if someone hadn't gone first, there's going to be no second. So I think that how we respond to the way that God has chosen to reveal himself, he's distinctive, but for everyone. And each of the covenants are important. It's not just there's an old covenant and a new covenant. And in fact, I've written a small booklet called Covenant Steps, which shows that journey. And when you read the Bible in terms of those covenants and take away the superimposed terms, New Testament and Old Testament, by the way, Testament is different from covenant. We can go into that. I explain that a little bit in the booklet. But then you start to see God's unfolding story, but they're like steps on which he builds. So even from Adam at the beginning, there's a covenant there of clothing. Then you come to Noah, where a covenant is made, which I call the covenant of the cloud, because it says I'll put my bow in the cloud. It wasn't called a rainbow, but it's a bow in the cloud. Of course, it comes from rain and sun, as we know. And then after that, he makes the covenant with Abraham, which is two-part, a child and a country. And you can't ignore those two. And that tracks right through the Bible if you look for it carefully. And then, of course, later there's Moses. And there's two parts of his covenant. The first one is what I call the commemoration. That's remembering the Passover. That was the first thing the Jews were asked to do, or Moses or Israelites were asked to do. And they do it still today. They remember the Passover. That is what is called and then they get the commands. So you get rescued first, and then you get the commands. So that's the one that I would refer to as being the old covenant. And in fact, Jeremiah does himself. And then, which is parallel with the new covenant, which is Jesus, who at the Passover is the covenant of the cup, but also of the coming. So, and again, with Jesus, you get rescued first, and then you learn how to live. You get the commands. So very similar. That's the parallel. In fact, Jeremiah says that the new covenant will not be like the old covenant that I made on the day I took you by the hand to take you out of Egypt. So on that day, that is the commemoration covenant, which Jesus on the absolute, the anniversary of that, as it were, takes it into the new covenant. There's a different view. So you get rescued from Egypt. Jesus obviously rescues everyone that gets rescued from Egypt, right up until, apart from those that exercise faith, that doesn't deal with sin and death, it's the journey. But if you lose that one, and the Jewish people are still to keep that, but it's surpassed. It's not superseded. It's still relevant. It's part of God's story. And when his word comes and it's written, his word endures. Then after that, so you get Moses with the commemoration of commandments. After that, you end up with David with the crown and the city. I think Jerusalem remains important. And finally, Jesus, the cup and the coming. So that's the kind of trajectory, but it doesn't ignore what's gone before. That's still I suppose in one sense, Israel continues, or even in that, the scriptures, there's a foreshadowing, and the church should be reflecting. And if we don't reflect properly, we're not reflecting who Jesus is. And if you take away the shadow or the reflection, you end up with a cardboard cutout that you can move wherever you like. And people do.
Yeah. Why did you want to get involved in CFI? And have you seen the work that they do there in Israel?
I have seen the work they do there, and obviously, like I said, that's the second part or third strand of what we do. So they're coming alongside, Israel and the Israelis, which of course includes 20% Arab population within Israel itself. And the work they do is for all people there. Obviously, they have a particular focus towards the Jewish people, because that's kind of the background, but it benefits everyone. So that's my sense. So I have certainly seen what they do there, but the challenge is twofold. In Isaiah talks about the weapons formed against you, they won't prosper, which obviously Israel is having to deal with today. And in fact, CFI are there alongside other volunteers helping with the consequences of that. But then it says, but you will refute every tongue that accuses. And here in the nations, that's the second aspect of what's going on. And we have to refute accusing tongues. We have to continue gently to explain, learning how to respond to each person with grace, what's going on, where we've come from. We don't always know quite where we're going, but if we know where we've come from, we've got a half a start. And the signposts along the way, I think if you have a better understanding of Israel in the Bible, and including the final part of the Bible written by Jewish apostles and overseen by Jewish apostles, then I think you get a better picture. We believe all the scripture is inspired, and I tend to see the scripture in four parts. I think that's the biblical way: the law, the prophets, the Psalms, and the apostles. And I've got a Bible reading plan that takes you through that in 52 weeks, so that it makes sure you cover the whole Bible each year. And that is then, as Paul writes to the Romans at the end, he says, everything written in the past was written to encourage us, to enable us to endure, and to give us hope. And if we only read part of the Bible, we won't be so encouraged, we won't learn how to endure, and we won't have as much hope.
Now, just recently, there was an anti-Semitism rally in London, and you were there. Tell us a bit about that.
I don't go up for everything. I went to quite a big rally just after the October the 7th of October catastrophe, I suppose you could call it, attacks and everything else, the menace of that. So I did go to that. I probably haven't been up for a big rally since, but this time I felt, no, I was free to go up. I would go up and just be there alongside. I'm not coming with any, I just want to be there alongside the Jewish people. Even in the olive tree, you're grafted in alongside, and that's the kind of understanding that I would have. I'd been over about 2 or 3 weeks before and been invited to speak at a synagogue in North London, which is a great privilege. And so I just went there, listened to what people had to say, met up with a few people I know from the Jewish community, including the person who co-invited me to the synagogue. And, it was a very important occasion. But I'm very careful not just to, make statements. Our role, as I understand it, certainly here and probably everywhere as Gentiles, is to show our faith. We've done enough speaking about it, and it hasn't been seen. Historically, Christianity and Judaism has been very poor, with poor relations, mostly from the point of view from a Christian perspective, a little bit reciprocated. But our role is to be a Christian, to be friends, and to be friends of Israel and the Jewish community. So yes, I was there. There was some, very, very encouraging aspects spoken. It was a rally. I'm not a great fan of marches. That always sounds too military. But a rally, I think, to rally together and just show your disgust at these anti-Semitic incidents, call it for what it is, and get some action that will actually make a difference. And it's not just about more security, it's a changing of a mindset and addressing, I'm afraid, some people that have managed to worm their way in, whether from the religious, particular religion right, or from and that's there are extremes in all instances, or the very extreme kind of more woke approach, where things are, again, another framework through which you see things and don't always see it clearly.
Were there many people there, and were there many Christians there as well supporting the Jewish community?
I understand there were. It was something like 20,000, I think, is what they estimated. So I didn't get around to see everyone that I would have liked to have done. There were some Christians. There were and on the platform too. The fairly recently appointed Bishop of Willesden, who's one of the London area bishops, spoke and spoke well, I thought. And I did spot an advisor for the Archbishop of Canterbury present, not even always the dog collar. You don't absolutely know. So I had a quick word with him because I'm also on the Church of England General Synod. So there are issues in how Israel is understood, or what's meant sometimes to support Palestinian Christians, which is a good thing to do, by the way, but it can morph into something that's the more unhelpful as far as Jewish-Christian relations is concerned. Yeah. So there were some Christians. I didn't see as many as I thought I might. A lot of the Jewish community, but again, it depends on, it was a big crowd. So I did try and wander around a little bit. There were naturally some Iranians, and they're obviously quite supportive in this country of Israel and what's going on. But I'm a little bit nervous about it sometimes because there's a slightly different place and agenda that than might be the norm, probably because of the challenge that Iran themselves have faced as much as anything. But yeah, so a good number. Some politicians, leader of the Conservative Party spoke, leader of Liberal Democrats, interestingly. There was someone who spoke from the government. They weren't well received, but we tried to listen to them respectfully, the current Labour government. And Reform UK spoke very well too. So Richard Tice, their vice, I don't know what they call it, vice chair of the party or whatever. Yeah.
Is Downing Street listening to what's happening with anti-Semitism, particularly in London?
I think they are, but they have been very slow. You can act with more money, you can act with more security, but that doesn't help. Actually, I mean, that's fine, that's good, but actually, it's a mindset change that's needed, and the government are a little bit nervous about tackling some of the extremist groups that are out there. So you've got, we've still not in our country prescribed the IRGC and then the particular brotherhood, which is, these are extreme elements of, of another faith, but actually those need to be, because they appear to be, conducting criminal activity in this country, they shouldn't be permitted to do so.
Are you concerned for the Jewish people in the UK? We've seen a second attack just recently in Golders Green.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. As I speak to different Jewish community, they feel very isolated. Obviously, they in their memory, including we get involved in Holocaust memorial events. There are Holocaust survivors or families. There are many, of course, who have lost families. Some came across on kinder transport, so they're aware of what happened then. Yes, so they feel that why does everyone hate us? That's a great shame, because we're here to show friendship and cooperation rather than to be in conflict. And actually, the benefits, as I would say, that we've received through Israel and the Jewish people, we've got our Bible. We've got a whole of the Bible written by Jewish people. That's how God chose to reveal himself. But even today, the technology, obviously technology can be used for good or ill, but a very large amount of the technology we're benefiting from in this country and around the world in today. So, we work with people like Technion in the UK to show the positive aspects of what we benefit from, and also the fact that they are a democratic country. Actually, within Israel, if you take the open doors, top 50 countries where Christians suffer the most, Israel's not on that list. So I think we need to recalibrate a little bit and just turn the dial to see a bit more clearly, which is one of our banners mottos: to see more and to see more clearly.
Are the Jews in particularly London and the UK seeing Christian support? Do they feel it? Do they know the Christians support them? Or many Christians?
They will know that many Christians do. many Christians, it's not really on their radar, to be fair. A lot of and some Christian charities are not supportive of Israel at all.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. So some of the established church, some of the movements have been overbalanced in their desire to help the Palestinians, to the extent where they would advocate for boycotting, divestment and sanctions against Israel. And there's a motion coming to General Synod in July, of which I'm a member of that synod, not that motion, which will need to be challenged. It's not well handled. Again, it comes down to ignorance and a degree of arrogance. I mean, we can hardly sort out our own affairs in the church, let alone trying to sort out something, miles across the, in another, a continent or stratosphere. Yeah.
Yeah. You're off to London today. Tell us what you're doing in London today.
It's I had an invite to go to a celebration of Israel 78, which is great. That's nice to do. So again, it's part of just being alongside. So this in our calendar, I know the calendar is slightly different in Israel, the 14th of May. So normally quite close to that. That's arranged by the Israel Embassy. Like I said, I by background, well, not really sports-wise, I used to play rugby and I tended to play on the wing. And that seems to be where I find myself with the Israel community. We're based quite on the south coast. So going up, I sort of come into the game when I need to and step back out when it's not right for me at that time. So we have to be selective what we do and don't do. But yes, I'm going up for that. That'd be nice to catch up. There's a good number of Christians. But it's trying to keep that balance of being Christian, being a friend, and being a friend of Israel and the Jewish community. They are quite distinctive things, and I need to make sure I'm distinctively Christian, that I'm showing my faith, and that they can see that. That takes time. It's kind of a relational ministry, and you can't have relationships with everybody. So where I can, I work with those that I've got to know over a period of time. Maybe others will get introduced. And of course, I'm representing, as a chief executive, Christian Friends of Israel here in the UK.
What is your prayer for Jews in the UK and for Israel as well?
I think the first thing is probably actually my prayer would be for the church, that the church would have a better understanding and would appreciate what they've received from Israel and from the Jewish people biblically, understand a bit more history, and find ways of friendship and cooperation with the Jewish people. For the Jewish people, I think they themselves need to move not just from the law, but through the prophets, the Psalms, and they need to recognize the apostles and their teaching in due course. But it's not easy because we put up lots of barriers in the way, and really see the continuation. They have the hope of the land, but they ultimately need the hope of Israel, that the Apostle Paul writes about at the end of Acts. And I think so it's the land and the line, and that would be something in terms of prayer. Yes, we want their safety, we want their well-being, we want them to be appreciated for all and who they are and what they've done. And that's the priority. That's the right thing to do. They're loved on account of the patriarchs, as Paul says. So we need to express that. But then, in view of God's mercy to us, we need to find our way to serve, and then leave the rest with the Lord. Yeah.
What's your website for people who'd like to know more about the work that you do in CFI UK?
It's cfi.org.uk.
Well, Jacob,
with the 3 W's before. Yeah.
Jacob, thank you very much for sharing today.
It's great. It's been nice to be with you, Paul. I hope this is helpful to people. And there's maybe another occasion I can go into more detail how we go to Christian festivals and try and explain, or to again provide resources that will help people on their journey of seeing Jesus more clearly, but then his backdrop more clearly as well.
Amen.